We're talking about borderline personality disorder. I am Rick Thomas with Daniel Berger. We're doing Life Over Coffee. Last week we talked about this very real issue. There are dynamic things that's happening in a person. It affects all of their relationships. They receive a label, borderline personality disorder. Daniel was talking to us like it doesn't say anything. I mean, it depends on who is giving the label, is depending on their interpretation. And so it is everywhere and nowhere all at the same time. And so it's a problem when you have a real issue that's going on, but you label it wrong. And of course, that leads into false solutions that aren't solutions. And so, Daniel, last week you started teasing out borderline personality disorder. You mentioned anger, you mentioned fear. Those are two common aspects of it. You also mentioned narcissism, which I always think of Philippians 2, esteem others more than yourself. And so that's flipped on its head where you're totally consumed with yourself. And so you have self-consumption, you have anger, you have fear. There's dynamics that's working inside this person and it's complicating their relationships. And then they go and they receive this label, I have borderline personality disorder. Now they have been put in a position of being a victim basically for the rest of their life. So there's no hope for that. Let's say that this individual believed all of that and they ran down that road for a long time and realized that I am self-destructing here, and I'm self-destructing my relationships, probably already gone through a divorce. Let's say they come to the end of themselves, that God pierces the darkness and the light comes on, and they realize that, maybe I'm thinking about this completely wrong. This person comes to you for counseling. What would you do with them? I mean, you would first deconstruct borderline personality disorder, give them a biblical way of thinking about it. Where would you go from that point forward?
Well, I think just to reiterate what you have already said and go back to Philippians 2, they have to come to a point of turning to Christ, because Philippians 2 makes it clear there can be no unity in the Spirit. And one of the things that we're really addressing in all these issues of anger and these issues of fear of man, fear of abandonment, fear of etc., selfishness, narcissism, whatever terms you want to use, all of those go back to unity. There can't be unity, so there's disunity in these relationships. And so usually when I begin to counsel, a lot of the people labeled as borderline personality disorder don't want to meet. They don't want help. It's about they don't even see themselves as wanting help. It's the other people that have the issues. So
they're the victim.
They're the victim. And of course, the label actually encourages this thinking. It actually doesn't discourage it. It kind of gives them a justification just to go full on, concerned about their themselves. And so it's a very difficult thing. So I'm typically counseling family versus the actual person, at least initially. And many times that's the only case people will come and say, there's complete disorder in our relationship. There's disunity. I can't even talk to this person without them saying I'm accusing me of something evil intent, etc. And so Philippians 2 makes this clear. There can be no comfort in the Spirit. There can be no unity. There can be no... And the two things that we've talked about in previous videos, but I think it's important. This is a lot of what we're calling mental disorder fits into Philippians 2. It's the natural selfishness of man. And when that's not dealt with by grace, and specifically we see Christ-likeness there mentioned right after the example of Jesus himself, the sky's the limit. So whether you call that narcissism, whether you call it abuse, whether you call that borderline personality disorder, whatever you want to call these behaviors and these mindsets, it is the natural man. So Philippians 2 says selfishness and pride. Don't do anything from selfishness and pride. It goes on in verses 12, 13, and 14 to say, in everything, do all things without grumbling and disputing, or without complaining, essentially. And the correlate there, it's not disconnected. He says, don't be selfish, don't be proud. He gives the example of Christ, who is the King of Kings, who humbled himself, didn't regard his position as something to be held on to. And that's our problem. Every one of us struggles with my kingdom, my position, my things. And so when things don't go our way, and it's interesting, God's been really working on my own heart about this. I complain a lot, not outright, not to people's face, but I do it in my soul. But it's pride that causes me to go, I deserve better than this. Even in silly things like traffic, we're coming up and we're like, you've got to be kidding me. This is going to take me forever. Instead of, God has a purpose for me sitting here. Now, again, I'm not saying that I constantly do this. I struggle with this. This is our human nature. So we're talking about normalcy here. And that's one of the things if I have the opportunity to meet with the actual person, I go through. You're not struggling with anything that no one else does. But you've gone down so far down this road, and then of course the label even justifying it further, that you've bought into this deceit that it has to be your way. And you've built this little kingdom of it will be my way, destroying everyone else. Well, that kind of has a domino effect too, of saying, you see, you don't want to be around me. Well, of course you don't want to be around you. So, the hope that is found in Christ is not just a neat little saying. It is the example of Jesus, who had every right to be selfish, who had every right to receive glory, which, of course, Philippians 2 says he did. And what I found is, whether it's in marriage, whether it's in a child, when a person's constantly complaining about others and about their life, they're struggling intensely with selfishness and pride.
Yeah, one of the other words in Philippians 2, he said participation in the Spirit.
Right.
Participation is koinonia, and so that's community. And so we are communing in the Spirit. And so if we're hostile toward others or antagonistic toward others, we're actually taking an adversarial role toward God. We are hostile to God. Right. We're not participating in the Spirit. And if we justify our actions that way as the victim, because I have this label, this is who I am, we're getting deeper and deeper and further away from participating the unity that we should have with each other. And so part of your counsel is that you don't start with that person because they're not willing to listen, and so you're meeting with family or the spouse or children or whomever to give them hope, give them a game plan, to maybe in some respects a cold wet towel, that this is reality. I mean, this is your reality, that's going to be hard apart from God breaking in and breaking this person's heart. All right, so let's say that God does that, and now we have the prodigal in verse 17 of chapter 15, that they're in the hog lot and they see clearly now.
Yeah.
And now it's the borderline personality person that's coming to you with their hat in their hand, and they're walking in humility, not pride. How would you help them?
Well, each case is different. Many, and this is not something that, it's a growing trend to be diagnosed as borderline personality. Interestingly enough, especially when there's a divorce going on. And I don't know if it's because there is selfishness in many of these cases, but it's not something that I've dealt with things like the construct of schizophrenia, bipolar, ADHD a lot more than I have borderline. It's typically families versus the actual person that's coming to me. In fact, I two people that I'm coming to my mind right now. Over the last 20 years that have actually sat down with me. One of them didn't want help. I mean, it was, I don't like what you're saying, I'm out of here type thing. The other one, sincerely, I believe was a believer, and it was years ago. I've lost track with him. So this is not something that, but I do know that many times from research, trauma is a big part of, and I want to be careful. It's not this struggle is not caused by trauma, because again, this is the natural man. But what it does do is if you think through, let's say that you're abused by, if you're a young lady, you're abused by a boyfriend, and he's cheating on you the whole time, and then you find out, well, you're naturally going to be very upset and very leery of these types of relationships. And let's say that you immediately find someone else and they do the exact same thing. Well, now you've established a pattern of all people are like this, and if they're like this, then my mom and dad have to be like this. I got to look out for myself. And now you've got this downward deceptive thinking starting to occur. Well, that has to be dealt with. So when people are genuine believers and they come to a place of repentance and desire to say, and let me pause there and go back to what you said about assembly in Philippians chapter 2. We're called, being a Christian is a call to assemble with like-minded people who are really messed up. But then second of all, to be unified. And that means I forego my natural inclination just to look out for myself. And I purposely look out for the cares of other people. I get to know what Rick really is concerned about in life, and I pray for him. I get to know what struggles you're going through and what burdens you're carrying. That's what we do, and that's hard work, and it's messy. And a lot of Christians really don't understand that. That's just fundamental to being Christ-like. And I'm not just saying a behavior. I'm saying a heart change of, I want to care about these people that I'm assembling with.
Right, and that is the answer to the question of how do you help them. You could say that everyone has borderline personality disorder if you mean by that we're all weird.
Yeah.
That we all have brokenness, we're all fallen. We all have been shaped by horrific or bad influences, unbiblical influences. We come into the world broken, and so you've got a glob of brokenness that's shaped by more brokenness. The chances of that not being weird in one way or another is 100 people out of 100 people are going to have quirks and weirdness, triggers, hang-ups, and they're going to react in ways that you don't appreciate, that aren't helpful, that are sinful. But if the solution is to look at that person, exegete that person, and try to understand, how did you get here? What are the shaping dynamics of your life? What are the choices that you have made? What's the things that you believe? What's the lies that you have that you're beholding to? But and that's when I asked you for a practical, how do you help them practically? You said each case is different, is what you said, and that's right. And so if we're going to esteem others more than ourselves, that is the answer. And so if you're meeting with the individual who has been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, you're not negating anything that has happened to them, but you're recategorizing it and you're helping them to see it, but it's unique to them.
Right.
And so in one sense, we couldn't say, here's the 6 things that you want to do, and then everybody that comes gets these 6 things, because that's not how it works. And then if you're working with a family, you're taking a longer approach, because now you're helping them to help this person because this person is not interested. But very similar thing, that you want them to be able to become good exegetes of this unique broken person that's in front of you. Yeah,
and I'll also add, I think this is good for us all, because again, the label, being labeled, or what they call diagnosed as borderline personality disordered or what have you, is not it doesn't matter. We're normally like this. So whether or not you're labeled or not, this is all of our struggle. We all struggle with anger, right? We're not to let anger, the sun go down upon our wrath. We all struggle with the fear of man and fear of abandonment, and et cetera, et cetera. So all of us are dealing with this, and So whether a person's labeled or not is irrelevant. We all can benefit from understanding a scriptural understanding. One of the things I just kind of want to leave us with on this video is a lot of people get hurt in church in the same way, and so they start this trend of being very standoffish, almost hurting other people before even getting to know them because they're expecting to be hurt. The reality is that you probably will be disappointed by everyone you know, and especially the people you're closest to. That's why spouses so many times are the most hurtful, because we almost want to surround ourselves with people that won't disappoint us. This is part of our selfish ambition. You'll be my friend because you're advantageous for that. And God talks about this in James chapter 1. It's real easy to be friends with someone who is beneficial to you.
Right.
And so if you think about someone who's struggling with these things, they've been hurt, and they're looking at, it's almost like I'm gonna cut you off before you have a chance to cut me off. It's almost like I'm gonna be at war with everyone. And that's the pattern that's essentially formed. And if we don't get back to a biblical understanding of man, that we're all really messed up. When I go to church, I'm not looking for a perfect church. I tried to do that for far too many years, and the pain and hurt was just incredible. There are bloggers that all they do out of bitterness and hurt. I mean, they could be labeled as borderline personality disorder, because all they're doing is cutting people off and anger and bitterness, going after people they don't even know. And it's in reference to what happened to them, even not related to that.
Yeah, so, and thank the Lord that everybody loves us, and
right.
No one criticizes us. We're talking about borderline personality disorder, or you could say how to help a messed up person, which is all of us. And I trust that this has been beneficial for you. If you have a topic that you want us to talk about, just please ask. Put it in the comment section. We'd love to consider it. Thank you so much for watching the video.